In this video, I am going to review a new historical TV series, Rise of the Raven. I will share what I liked and disliked about the series and whether I recommend watching it or not. Rise of the Raven is a 10-part Hungarian TV series about John Hunyadi, a 15th century military leader and regent of Hungary who had significant military successes against the rising Ottoman Empire. The story is based on the popular Hungarian novel series Hunyadi, written by Morban. The TV series is a co-production between several countries. I think especially Austria and the ORF contributed a lot, but there were actors and other crew members from many other European countries. It aired this spring on TV in Hungary, Austria and Slovenia, if I am not mistaken, and it is also available on Netflix now. Rise of the Raven was marketed as a Game of Thrones type TV series, or historical Game of Thrones, or a Hungarian Game of Thrones, and later I will tell my opinion here whether it managed to become a Game of Thrones like series or not. Now, let's see the positives and the negatives of the show. It is a peculiar situation because, as you will see, the two groups will overlap slightly, and something I consider a positive aspect will also appear on the negative side, but I will explain. Firstly, I think the original idea was quite good to make a TV show about John Hunyadi, who was a very special historical figure, very significant too, not just in Hungarian history, but for the history of the whole of Europe. His son, King Matthias Corvinus, is probably much more famous, but John was no less important. Did you know that noon church bell tolling in Europe is basically thanks to John Hunyadi? And this was such an intense historical era with so many great and interesting historical figures. There was so much going on in Europe. John's contemporaries, his allies and enemies in the story make material for great supporting characters in the TV show. Sigismund of Luxembourg, Holy Roman Emperor, Vlad Tepes, you know, the Dracula guy, Sultans Murad II and Mehmed the Conqueror, who conquered Constantinople in John Hunyadi's lifetime, Mara Brankovic, Ulrich of Celje, Vladislav of Poland, and also, of course, the young Matthias Hunyadi, aka Matthias Corvinus. So everything is there for an exciting story and a great TV series. And indeed, throughout the 10 episodes of Rise of the Raven, there is just so much going on all the time that you can never get bored. So if you like TV shows with a fast pace, this is definitely such a show. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the series was an international co-production with actors from several countries. And the result is a historical TV series with all historical characters speaking in their native language. So you will hear the Ottoman Sultans speaking in Turkish, the Italians speaking in Italian, and so on. This makes it such a great, unique TV show, and it is such a good example. Hopefully other historical TV shows will follow this example in the future. Another great thing about the show is how interesting most supporting characters are. Not just those interesting historical figures that I mentioned earlier, but the lesser known ones, especially the women, are interesting multi-layered characters in the show. Even the villains of the story, the enemies of the main hero, are portrayed as complex humans, as multi-layered, interesting characters, not as simply bad and evil cartoon villains. This is how all historical dramas should be, and there are current TV shows that could take Rise of the Raven as an example about how to portray your enemies. Turkish shows, for instance. Yes, I'm looking at you, Mehmet Fediler Sultani. As the creators of the show were very open about their intention to make this series a Game of Thrones, it was a key question whether the show will be up to the mark when it comes to the technical facts and the visuals of the series. The expectations were very high, also because it became public how extremely expensive the show turned out to be. As far as I know, it is by far the most expensive Hungarian TV show ever, and also among the European TV shows, this is one of the most expensive ones. In recent years, the Hungarian film industry, which mostly works with state money, has produced several historical productions, but most of them met very heavy criticism, especially because they were not on par with their very high budget. You just couldn't see where exactly all that money went. Well, you could only guess. But in this case, I can definitely say you can see the money. You can see all of it, on the effects, on the CGI, on how the series looks in general. The best example of the show's great effects is most certainly the last episode, the 10th episode, which shows the 1456 Siege of Belgrade. And this episode is so great. Not just the effects in the battle, but the whole storyline of the battle, of the other things going on in other locations. This episode is just so great. The writing, the acting, the effects, everything. This episode was by far the best in the series, and it made the whole series, the whole experience, so much better. But now let's see what I didn't like about Rise of the Raven. First of all, I think most problems the show has one main cause, and that is that the creators of the show wanted to stuff too many things, too many characters, too many locations, and too many storylines into these 10 episodes. And 10 episodes are simply not enough for all that. It is not only that the several eventful decades of John Hunyadi's life and era are too much for just one season, only 10 episodes, but the novel series the show is based on consists of more than 10 not so short books. It's as if HBO had created an only 10 episode long TV series about George R. R. Martin's whole Song of Ice and Fire story. If the creators of Rise of the Raven only had a budget for a 10 episode long TV series of this high quality, then fine, but then they should have just abandoned this novel series basis and they should have just focused on much less characters and storylines. One of the main problems this causes is that there are many side storylines that just don't go anywhere because there is no time to make something of them. I get that they were probably important side storylines in the books, but they went somewhere in the books. While in the TV show, there is no time for them to develop, so many of them are just abandoned halfway, so there is no sense in them being there at all in the first place. Moreover, there are main important storylines, particularly the romantic storylines, the love stories in the show, that just develop and escalate far too fast. This is one of the biggest downsides of the show's very fast pace. In one scene, a man and a woman see each other for the first time and hardly talk, and in the next scene they are madly in love and get married, and we have no idea what happened in between. And as a result, sometimes these storylines feel more cringy than romantic or touching. And this is most conspicuous in the case of the main love storyline between the main male character and the main female character. Their love story is so underdeveloped that it is painful. And I have problems with their characters in general as well. While among the positives I mentioned the multi-layered supporting characters of the show, the main characters are kinda less interesting. They are just far too simple. There is nothing intriguing about them. No big character developments or character arcs, not many layers, nothing special. All in all, I think all these efforts to make this series a Game of Thrones imitation do not work well. It was a good idea and it could have worked with this historical era, with these historical figures, with this novel series. It was the perfect material for a historical Game of Thrones, but then you would have needed more seasons and much more episodes. The creators of Rise of the Raven also seem to think that if you want to imitate Game of Thrones, your TV show had to include a lot of nakedness and violence. What they didn't seem to understand is that yes, Game of Thrones did include a lot of those types of scenes, but they usually had an important place in the series. They served a precise purpose in the plot normally. While here, in Rise of the Raven, both the naked scenes and the violence were very self-serving, is that the word? The creators seemed to add a lot of such scenes just to have some nakedness or some violence in every single episode, and not because they served the plot in any particular way at that part of the storyline. Okay, so much about the positives and negatives. I haven't mentioned the historical accuracy or inaccuracy of the series on either side, and that is because I find that kinda neutral. I mean, I think it is about as historically accurate as your usual historical TV series, with several inaccuracies added for the sake of drama. I found some of these historical inaccuracies justified and some disturbing, at least for me. I wonder what someone who doesn't know the history behind the show's story would say about it. Are there disturbing historical inaccuracies? I would really love to know the opinion of someone not Hungarian. And I would really love to hear opinions about the show in general. Would I recommend it? I think yes, it can be a great viewing experience. Although, if I had to recommend one Hungarian historical series to watch, perhaps I would recommend another recent Hungarian TV series, Tündérkert or Fair Garden, which is a series about the Báthory dynasty of Transylvania, particularly the rule of Gabriel Báthory as Prince of Transylvania, and the most infamous Báthory, Elizabeth, the Blood Countess, is also an important character of that series. Now that we talked about Game of Thrones comparisons, perhaps Fairy Garden reminds me a bit more of Game of Thrones than Rise of the Raven, with all its political machinations and schemes and plots. It's great. Visually, it is not on the level of Rise of the Raven, sure. So if you want less drama and plotting and more great battle scenes and effects, then I would rather recommend Rise of the Raven.